as you know, I had my own awareness 5 years ago, and before that I was just in the business world, and
Yes.
you'd have told me anything about consciousness, I would have laughed at you because it didn't really interest me. So in terms of my messages, whatever has been brought to my attention, and what I feel like I should be doing right now is not so much like acting as a savior, a guru, or a leader in any way, but trying to network people so they can basically awaken and raise their vibration and to go up to the next or higher dimension. I said dimension, but it's more about a vibration more than anything else. Like I have a different frequency. So I don't know if you know much about that yourself.
What does it actually mean to raise one's frequency? What does it actually mean scientifically? What does it mean in terms of science to raise one's vibration? I feel that there's a lot of loose talk about this with not a lot of anything other than platitudes. Now, I do believe in the idea of expanding consciousness, and I do absolutely believe that we have abilities in our mind to understand and do things in terms of remote viewing and beyond, frankly, to interact with a reality that we can call non-local or non-physical. Right? So that's all real. So maybe that's what you mean when you talk about raising frequency. But when people talk about raising their frequency, that means pretty much nothing to me, to be honest with you. Maybe we're just looking at the same thing using a different language.
Maybe.
Yes. Right. I think maybe that's probably the case. I also do believe in other dimensions of reality in what we might call spiritual dimension. Like I have no problem believing that whatsoever. My ability to have knowledge of those dimensions of reality, to me, I feel that me, as well as everyone else that I talk to, we're basically in the realm of speculating and groping around in the dark. I run into people all the time, every day practically, who are convinced that they know specifically the nature of these other realities. And I can just tell you most of the time I'm not very impressed by what they think they know. So it doesn't mean that they don't know, but there's a lot of loose talk about this.
Right. Okay. So going back to the vibration aspect, what I'm saying is we all respond to a certain frequency on this planet in our 3D model. So whatever we see, whatever we hear, whatever we encounter is based on that 3D vibration. Basically.
You say 3D?
Yes. Yes.
So the Earth has a frequency, the Earth has a vibration. All life responds to vibrations. Vibrations in the form of music, in the form of chants, in the form of all kinds of things have an effect on our body and our mind. So all that's very important. So if you by that you mean that raises our vibration, I would say that's an excellent thing to do. We want to create an orderly vibration in our bodies. You look at how magnetic fields can create beautiful patterns, right, out of little filings.
Right.
This is an important part of our world. We know about how vibrations can affect water, which we are 70% of. Our bodies are mostly water. So yes, I mean, actually I do believe. And I'm a practitioner of Kundalini Yoga. If anything, what that tells us is that we do vibrational chants in that, as well as really focus on Kundalini energy. So these are things that I don't really need to be persuaded of. I'm very careful when I listen to people talking about raising frequency because I still don't really know what they mean.
Right. So it's more about raising your awareness, and so you can basically be able to use telepathy and doing all these sort of things that we can't do today, potentially. Being like mind readers and being aware of the cosmos. Sure.
So we can agree on that for sure.
Getting rid of the amnesia that we all suffer from, as where we come from and all of this. If we basically can raise our vibration, so accessing not so much different realms, but where we come from, and higher frequency in terms of.
Well, how do we know where we come from? What does that mean exactly?
Well, for my own experience, for what I went through is I went back to light source, and I actually dealt with.
What do you mean when you say you went back to light source? I don't understand what that means.
Okay, so basically my experience was I went to what people call heaven. I basically went through different ways to that space, and which is far away in the cosmos, and then beyond that there is basically the source, and I saw it as a matrix. Basically it was definitely more of a program, And the being that was in charge of that was AR. And I had no idea what AR meant.
A-R?
AR, E-A, the two letters E and A.
I see.
And that name is actually the word for Enki, which is like the Anunnaki god. And I had no idea about, AR in the first place.
May I interrupt you? When you say you went back to this, was this in a actual physical, tangible realm, or was this in a kind of a vision
it was
that you had?
It was a hypnosis session.
It was a what?
Hypnosis session.
Hypnosis
session
okay.
2 weeks ago.
I see.
So that just happened 2 weeks ago, but I had other experiences during meditation.
Yes.
Where I could just go back to the same place and feel the energy, feel like what basically the Buddhist monks that I've encountered and talked to say that is what they believe in too. But this is very new to me.
It's quite interesting. So you went back to this light source, as you described it, and experienced like where we came from.
Yes. So whether everything in the multi-universe was created. So I basically went back to that source, which is beyond what we call heaven. In fact, it's like the mini-me. Like if there's a God there, it's kind of the mini-me of whoever is in charge, which is to me what Ea was, like the father of everything. And during that session, I was able to go from one universe to another, almost like a honeycomb system, but the walls were made of like cellulose, and I was able to go through it and then see different universes that some really feel very odd and not comfortable, and then I moved on and went to the source.
It sounds a bit like the movie Interstellar. Have you seen this?
Yeah.
So there's a moment toward the end. I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but where they go back through. There's time travel aspects to this that are really quite interesting, and dimensions. And at the end of it, they're in what seems like a honeycomb type of a structure, where they're looking at different places in space time. So this is an idea that is out there. It's quite interesting.
Right. Yes, but the fact is that the AR being that was on top, that basically was overseeing everything, almost like sent me back into the universe, like almost like I was a cable or fiber optics type, go to analyze and see the defects that were created along the way. And some of that was related to the reptilian race as well, and whatever is in that department. And it's very foreign to me because this is not something I'm really used to.
Well, I can say in my own research, my own work, I don't really go to the places that you're going here. Look, for anyone who doesn't know what I do, I will never be far from my professional training, which is that of a historian. So and I'm a political sort of a analyst as well. This is how for 20 plus years I've researched the UFO phenomenon, primarily, not exclusively, but primarily from a political point of view and an archival point of view. So looking at actual government documents. This is very 3D, as some people like to put it. Studying the history. What is U.S. government policy about UFOs? What are other government policies about UFOs? What are some of the more interesting cases and encounters and so forth? And that I have a very good understanding of. And for that I've done a very extended historical analysis of the UFO phenomenon. And what I can say at a very basic level is there's absolutely a reality to this phenomenon. There is unquestionably a cover-up by political and intelligence community authorities of that reality. And that an acknowledgement of that reality is potentially the most revolutionary, transformative bit of knowledge of our world. It very well could be. Because, not simply, is this reality something that represents revolutionary technology, that's important itself, new energy paradigm and so forth. But I think even more fundamentally, it's quite possible that a true understanding of the UFO phenomenon, which does include beings from elsewhere, could tell us something about ourselves. And this is along the lines of what you're talking about. So one of the things that has to be said about our history of contact with other beings is that there is some mind-to-mind communication that is happening, and it's almost every single time. Think of it this way. If you ever come across an abduction or an encounter experience and an alien's just talking with their mouth, that's when you should be suspicious, because nearly all of the encounter experiences are somehow telepathic or mind to mind. And so what that tells me is not only are these beings telepathic, but so are we. And so a proper understanding of this phenomenon would open the door to a revolution in consciousness studies, right?
Now you talk about new energies, new types of energies moving forward. Don't you think that we need to be more prepared to embrace those technologies and getting rid of the oil, technology that we have today?
We absolutely have to do this. So the oil and the petroleum dependency that we have is really comes down to what I call a hierarchical model. So in other words, think of it this way. So oil and natural gas, they're the two main hydrocarbon fuels that we have on this planet, all exist in specific geographic locations on the Earth. Now what that means is that governments with powerful militaries then seek to control, right, those specific parts of the world, and then they control the distribution through pipelines and whatnot to the rest of the world, and that's tremendous power. That means they control the energy, the rest of us buy it, and they control us, therefore. However, what if, as it certainly seems, the UFO phenomenon represents technology that goes beyond petroleum? Clearly, whatever these craft are using to go from here to there, it's not gasoline. It's something much better. That answer could be zero-point energy. It could be some form of nuclear fusion. To me, it almost doesn't matter. The point is that there's something going on that allows a craft to do right-angle turns, instant acceleration, all of these things, a better form of energy. And let's just say that that energy is virtually free, all right, as many people believe. So let's say free energy. Well, imagine how revolutionary that would be in our society. So if you and I and everyone watching this had access to true, like a free energy device that could heat your home for free forever, that could power your vehicle, that could allow you to have machinery that you could then run at no cost, you would have almost total freedom to run your life however you wanted. You wouldn't really be dependent on the state for much of anything.
Which is why potentially the disclosure is being delayed. So
in my opinion, absolutely. And I co-authored a book almost 7 years ago, in which this was one of the main theses that I had. AD, after disclosure, we talked about this. And I felt then and I feel now that the energy paradigm is probably the single most important reason for major secrecy on the UFO subject, because opening up this phenomenon in terms of energy changes absolutely everything. It changes everything that the United States currently does in terms of dominating the world, in terms of lying to the world, in terms of doing regime change over countries that have oil. All of these awful things, that force the US-dominated global media to lie to people on a daily basis. Because when you lie and lie and lie, this is what the US does to the world. And all of it is based on, I feel, control over the global sources of energy. So yes, the UFO phenomenon is revolutionary in that way. But that's only, in a sense, that's only the beginning.
Right, but all governments are reacting the same way as the US. I mean, obviously, I have an audience in France and Canada and everywhere.
Well, they're all under US domination.
Right.
Pretty much all of them. I mean, with a very few exceptions. Russia and China are exceptions. Iran is an exception. Syria is an exception. North Korea. I mean, those are the countries that the U.S. wants to do regime change to, because they're not under U.S. control right now. So, but all the others, I mean, France right now has no independence. Britain, no independence. Canada, no independence. Australia, none. I mean, all of them, every last one, are under domination by the U.S. system. Now, it's a hierarchy. So they're not all equal vassals. Some are more powerful than others. Like Britain has a very special relationship, Australia and Canada, and in France as well. Other countries like Poland are farther down the list. So it's a specific hierarchy, but it's a US-dominated hierarchy. Those countries have no independence of policy. It's why, just as an aside, Marine Le Pen has been so demonized by the West, because she is, whatever one says about her, the real reason that they've made her this demon is because she's absolutely talking about independence from U.S. policy. And that's really her great sin in the eyes of the West.
So, my belief is that we are all being controlled, by our governments. So they basically want us to still be like sheeple and trying to control us and manipulate us the way they want. But deep down, behind that, if we include the ET presence, do you have any thoughts on that? Thinking that potentially the reptilians would be behind U.S. governments or worldwide governments in power, and then you have more benevolent beings trying to interact with their hybrids on the planet and trying to raise their awareness. Is that possible?
Well, it certainly is possible, but these are all matters of speculation on which there's not a lot of consistent evidence, frankly, other than just some people talking about what they say are their experiences. There are people who talk about reptilians. There are people who talk about greys and insectoids, and there are people who talk about human-like beings that are not quite human. There's lots of theories out there. My own take on it is that based on the evidence globally of sightings that are in populated areas, sightings that are in desolate areas, sightings that are in the middle of the Arctic Ocean, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and in New York City. They're everywhere. So I think that these other beings have had a long-standing interest in life on Earth. I don't know whether it's what we would call malevolent or benevolent. In fact, I don't really like using that phrase when I talk about their motivations. Are human beings malevolent or benevolent? And how do we make these judgments? What are our motivations when we deal with other animals? Would cows call human beings malevolent, demonic beings? They probably would, frankly, when you consider what we do to them. So I'm very uncomfortable with this idea. Positivity, negativity. It's very Manichaean. It's very Christian. It's very New Agey. And I'm not sure I'm really down with it. But when I look at these other beings, I think, complex motivations. I also see beings that are probably fundamentally different from us. I've talked about this many times. I've come to understand human beings, we're unique creatures. And for all the talk about people who want to do ascension, and I almost feel that part of it is wanting to leave their actual humanity behind. What we are mortal beings in physical bodies with families and mothers and fathers and people that we love. We have senses of humor. We have emotions. These other beings, are they like that actually? I really wonder. Are they even naturally occurring beings? Or are they the product of an advanced artificial intelligence with access to advanced nanotech, organic 3D printing? Let's consider, the possibilities that they could be completely artificially created, right? That they wouldn't even have mothers. They wouldn't nurse at their mother's breast and develop an emotional bonding with their mother, which sets their whole psychology for the rest of their lives, like we do. So if that's the case, they have a psychology that would be alien to our own. Doesn't mean that they're bad, but I really wonder, like, in terms of looking at them as negative or positive, they may be interstellar economic hitmen. You know what I mean? There's a book, Economic Hitmen. And it's all about bankers and international thieves of nations. What if they come from another system and they're nothing other than just using us for what they can use us? Or are there other groups? How many groups are there? Do we even know? That maybe have a more benevolent view of us.
So you talk about the AI technology and about the alien being AI potentially, but why does it make you believe that we may be potentially AI ourselves, or we may be living in a program? Like, we're already conditioned from birth to know that the grass is green and the sky is blue and all of this. So we are conditioned. It's
possible. One variation of that is called a simulation hypothesis, in which it's even beyond the Matrix. In the Matrix, you're in a computer-generated reality that you think is real. In some of the more advanced, out there versions of the simulation hypothesis, not only is all of this an algorithm, but so are we. That we are sentient programs, sentient algorithms that happen to think that we have flesh and bone. Maybe that's true. It's hard to prove or disprove some of these theories. So in terms of us being AI, it's an interesting hypothesis. I mean, I've talked about it myself a few times. I'm fascinated by it. But I don't know. I mean, you know, in philosophy and in science, there's a concept known as falsifiability. All right. So in other words, I could say to you right now that I have knowledge that we are actually all little morsels on a dinner plate of a big giant, and he's going to eat us. And you might think, well, that's a pretty crazy idea, but you might not be able to disprove it. Mm-hmm. How do you disprove it? You can't falsify it. I can't verify it or falsify it. So it could be true. We could be, you know, on a dinner plate of some giant. Mm-hmm. But a scientist or a philosopher would say, well, maybe, but it's not valid. In other words, since I have no opportunity to prove or disprove it, it's really not fair. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not cricket for me to go into these areas. And I kind of agree with that philosophy. Now, I mean, it is true
it's
that
kind
we...
of the myth of the cavern, you know, with Plato.
Yes, indeed.
You have the prisoners looking at the wall and shadows.
One of the most brilliant analogies of knowledge ever devised, mm-hmm. Plato's cave. Mm-hmm. This idea that, right, you're in a cave, and Plato, you know, he says, like, if you've spent your whole life in this cave, and behind you is a fire, and all you see, your whole life, are the shadows that the fire makes on the wall, and you think that's the reality. And then somehow one of you get out, and you struggle your way out of this dark cave, and you see this blinding sunlight, and at first it's so bright you can't even see. And then you realize, wow, there's this other reality. Mm-hmm. And then you go back and tell your friends in the cave, and they laugh at you and they get rid of you. Mm-hmm. All right, so yes, that's a brilliant analogy to what in Plato's formulation, how this physical reality is like seeing those shadows, mm-hmm. and that there's a deeper, more profound spiritual reality. It's a powerful idea, and it could be absolutely true. You yourself experienced something like this, mm-hmm. by, you know, your description.
That's right. And, you know, Socrates was the teacher of Plato.
Indeed.
He basically went to the Library of Alexandria.
The Library of Alexandria was the greatest repository of ancient knowledge. Mm-hmm. And it is a horrible tragedy. It's a crime to us that we don't have access to that.
So potentially
library.
Socrates may have accessed something to this kind of knowledge that disappeared. And somehow Plato, who was writing, you know, Socrates' teaching, potentially translated.
Maybe. I didn't hear so much about Socrates so much as Pythagoras, mm-hmm. who was a little bit earlier. Some of these ancient Greek philosophers, I'm sure, did have access to the Library of Alexandria. For my part, I was not aware of stories that Socrates had gone there, but could be. Mm-hmm. Could be. But back to the idea of falsifiability, it's not that I want to discount every non-provable theory, but I do think it's probably a good practice to be careful mm-hmm. about jumping into theories that cannot be proven or disproven.
I understand. However, you know, going back to raising your vibration, what I believe is also when you encounter those beings, and I had physical interactions with them, mm-hmm. it might be hard for anybody to believe it, and you know, it would have been.
I don't have a hard time believing it. I mean, I actually don't. That you and many other people have had very extraordinary encounters that are hard to put into our paradigm of knowledge. Mm-hmm. So I'm perfectly willing to accept it.
But you know, I don't know why, for example, I've been able to see them when, you know, I wasn't expecting them. I was not really, you know, meditating or opening myself to it. It's just, you know, it just occurred. Now, this interaction from their angle, you know, may have triggered something in me, like, you know, physically, mentally, I don't know. But at the same time, this is accessible to anybody. But that's what I believe. Mm-hmm. So if we are immortal, you know, souls living in this, you know, body, you know, I believe that as energy, it's more like energy rather than like a soul and being religious about it. It could also belong to that program that, you know, energy flows through the cosmos, and then we can basically create whatever we want. And you know, this reality could belong to this massive, you know, universal consciousness. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Does it make sense? Or?
It makes sense. It's just an interesting way to look at the universe, and as far as what I can do with that knowledge myself, I'll have to reflect on that. I'm not really sure what I can do with that.
Right.
But in terms of us participating in a reality of a universal consciousness, yes, I mean, I think it's an attractive idea. Mm-hmm. And you know, as I said earlier, I feel that all of us have a capability of expanded consciousness in ways that we don't ordinarily experience. For me, I will say expanded consciousness is not so much developing superpowers, which a lot of people turn it into. And I'm not saying you do, but for me, expanded consciousness isn't really about getting superpowers, which I think a lot of people think about this. I become a better remote viewer, or I perceive reality and dimensions in ways that I didn't ordinarily. That's cool, and it's not a bad thing to do. But for me, the question is, how does it make me a better person? All right. Does it make me more ethical? Does it make me more kind? Does it make me more perceptive about the world that I'm living in here? Does it make my politics smarter? Does it make my social interactions better or not? I can tell you, this is not, I will say this to some of the people who may be listening. Some of the rudest, most self-absorbed, narcissistic people I have ever met in my life are into New Age consciousness. It doesn't help them become better people. It helps them become more narcissistic and self-absorbed. Yeah. So to me, if they're on a path of higher consciousness, they're doing something wrong. All right. To me, higher consciousness ultimately means deep, penetrating self-reflection. All right, about what is important in life, and it's about stripping away illusions. That we're all born into illusion. Every one of us. We're born into false ideas about our world, about our country, and about ourselves. And the only way that we achieve personal growth is through the painful process of stripping those illusions away. And it is painful because we get attached to certain ideas. And ultimately, to be perfectly candid, the most painful ideas are when we start confronting how awful we have often been to other people. All right, in terms of our selfishness, and so if we're not really confronting that, all right, all of the expanded consciousness is for nothing. All right, if it doesn't make you a better human being and interact with people in a more loving way and willing to understand that other people have different opinions than you and accepting them nonetheless, and recognizing also that you yourself, I myself, have been wrong countless times about many things. So for me to judge someone else on the basis of what they believe, whether that's socially or politically or anything else, if I'm judging them, then I'm not experiencing much higher consciousness at all. That's my take on it. Right. So it's not about developing superpowers of perception. It might be about developing superpowers of compassion and understanding and self-reflection. Yes. To me, that's more important. I won't lie. I think that's the most important thing that I could develop. And that only comes from hard work. That doesn't come from taking DMT or going on a trip. It comes from detailed self-reflection.